What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're going to take a look at the premium attackers. I think at this point we all know that Erling Haaland is pretty much essential, but what about Mo Salah? He's been essential in the past. Is that still the case? You've also got Kane and De Bruyne to consider as well. So I'm going to give you my thoughts, talk about the stats, look at the fixtures, and then come to some kind of conclusion at the end. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button to help me hit 400,000 subscribers, and let's jump into it. So just some quick thoughts on premium players in general. Often when we're looking to build our FPL squads, we'll ask whether or not a player is good value. And what we're really saying is, are they going to outscore the price that has been set by FPL? So if you've only got £6 million to spend on a midfielder, out of all the options you could go for, which one is most likely to score like a 7 or an £8 million player? That's the one that you want. But when it comes to premium players, the value is in the consistency of the amount of points they score, and that then makes them good captaincy options, and you should be happy to pay a premium to have the best captain every single week. Now, some of you might have already decided that Haaland is the best captain from now until he gets injured, and you're not going to captain anyone else. That's perfectly fine if that's how you want to play it, but then you've got to question the value of those other premium players if you're not going to captain them. You could have like Haaland and Kane in your squad just in case Haaland gets injured, but in all those weeks where you're not captaining Kane, is there a better way to kind of spend that money? You don't want premium players to be at a detriment to the rest of your squad. So is there more value in two mid-price players instead? So you could have Salah and Enciso for 18 million. And don't get me wrong, I think there's potential for Enciso to be a great value player. But if he doesn't get the minutes and he is in and out of the team, could you be better off with Rashford and Son? Especially if you're just captaining Haaland anyway. So they're the things to think about when you're considering putting kind of 2 or 3 premiums in your squad. Last year, a lot of people had 3 premium players, usually Haaland, Kane and Salah, in their squad for lots of time during last season, and it was fine because Martinelli started at 6 million, Odegaard was 6.5, Rashford was 6.5, and they all absolutely smashed it. The problem is those players have all gone up in price, and the ones that are now 5.5 or 6 million, they don't look quite as likely to go and hit those 180 to 200 points. So it's going to be a lot more difficult to have 3 premiums. 2's probably going to be the maximum, but even that might not be needed. All right, let's take a look at the stats. I've included Kevin De Bruyne on the list because he's the only other player that costs more than 10 million. I think last year at 12 million, I was kind of against owning him for most of the season. And one of the reasons for that is his goal threat. If you look at that non-penalty expected goals per 90 minutes, 0.8 for Haaland, absolutely ridiculous. 0.47 for Salah, 0.49 for Kane. And for De Bruyne, it's just 0.19. And I know what people are going to say. He's fantastic at shooting from outside the box. I get that. But in terms of clear-cut, good goal-scoring opportunities, he doesn't get that many. Of course, when it comes to creativity, he's the best on this list. 0.6 expected assists per 90 minutes is fantastic, but assists aren't worth as much to us in FPL. They're only 3 points. So when it comes to captaincy, I don't really like going for Kevin De Bruyne whatsoever. I do think he's more viable for our teams this year than he was last year because he's had a 1.5 million price drop, but I would question whether he's worth it over a Son or a Rashford or a Fernandes or a Saka and the money you would then save as well. So Kevin De Bruyne is a fantastic footballer, and at 10.5 million with the fixtures Man City have, I might consider him. But I still think for FPL this year, he's probably not going to be in my squad that often. When it comes to the other 3 players, it's not surprising that Haaland is right at the top in terms of pretty much all stats. Even expected assists, he did pretty well at last year. 7.77 points per match. I think at 14 million, he's still great value because he's so consistent and because we're going to want to captain him so much. I do wonder what price he would have had to been at for us to not consider putting him in our squads. Maybe 15, 16, 17 million. I don't know what the cutoff is, but at 14 million, he's already over 80% owned, and he's got to be in our squads. I don't think there's any reason not to have him. The big question then is, do you have Salah or Kane to go alongside him? I think if I was picking between the two and everything was equal in terms of fixtures, Salah would still be my man. Surprise, surprise if you watched the videos last year. But if you look at those underlying numbers, I know that Kane outscored him for points per match, but in terms of expected goals and expected assists combined, they're very similar. And Salah's listed as a midfielder. So in terms of clean sheet points and extra points for a goal, that is an advantage he holds over Kane. Now, a lot of people are saying that under Postecoglou, Spurs are going to be much more attacking, and I'm sure they will be, given the managers they've had, the last 2 or 3 they've had, but I'm not convinced it means Kane's going to score more goals. I just think as a team, they'll be better. Son's not going to be as bad as he was last year. James Maddison's a good addition. Kulusevski, obviously, when he first came in, was great. Didn't have the greatest season last year. But all 3 of those players I've just mentioned, they can contribute more goals than maybe the rest of the Spurs team did last year. So Kane's still going to be great. His underlying numbers are still fantastic, as long as he doesn't go to Bayern. But between him and Salah, if the fixtures are similar, I still think Salah is the better option. The key question for you is, do you need that second premium? Now, this time last year, loads of questions about having 3 premiums. And I said, I probably wouldn't do it, but it's the most viable it's been for a long time. And it was because of all those cheap players I mentioned already. This year, because of how ridiculous Haaland is, and the fact he's 14 million, I still think he's an obvious buy at that price, but it does eat a little bit more of our budget than maybe Salah and Kane have the last few years. 1 premium is more viable than it has been for a long time, because even if Haaland got injured, it's a pretty easy swap to Kane in 1 move, or it's 2 moves to get to Salah, bearing in mind that because he's over 80% owned, everyone's going to be in the same boat anyway. So I don't think it's as essential to have a second premium this year, but let's take a look at the fixtures. So for those of you that like to do things a little bit different, maybe go against the crowd, the fixtures don't really help you do that because the opening games for Man City are so good. First day of the season, newly promoted side, Burnley away. Then it's Newcastle at home in Game Week 2. Another newly promoted side in Game Week 3, Sheffield United away. Game Week 4, it's Fulham at home. And then in Game Week 5, it's West Ham away. And then in Game Week 6, which I've not got on screen, but I can tell you, it's Nottingham Forest at home. So there's not many fixtures there where you could argue that Haaland isn't the best captain. The one that kind of stands out is probably Game Week 2 because Haaland's got Newcastle at home and Salah has Bournemouth away. Now, if you're asking me right now to predict who gets the most points in that game week, I would probably say Salah, but I don't know if it's worth it for that 1 game week only, unless, of course, you're happy with the rest of your squad while it's got Salah in it. Because it's not just him from Liverpool you need to consider, it's also Trent. I found it very difficult so far to get a good draft with Haaland, Salah and Trent. So if you want Salah, you've probably got to not have Trent as well. So there's lots of things to consider. Outside of that, in Game Week 5, Haaland has West Ham away. You could argue that Kane is better with Sheffield United at home. But again, for that 1 game week, is it worth it? Because in Game Week 2, when we're saying Haaland's got Newcastle at home, which I don't think is a completely awful fixture. No game is really that difficult for Man City. Kane's got Man United at home. So where you gain in 1 week, you lose it somewhere else instead. So looking at those fixtures, that tells me it's not really essential by any stretch to have a second premium. If we look a little bit later on, if we really want to go against Haaland, in game weeks 8, 9 and 10, Man City have got Arsenal away, Brighton at home and Man United away. In terms of tricky runs, that's about as tricky as it's going to get for Man City. And if you look at Salah in those 3 game weeks, so 8, 9 and 10, they've got Brighton away, Everton at home and Nottingham Forest at home. So maybe when we get to that point, there will be a case to be made to not necessarily ditch Haaland and get rid of him, but find a way to get Salah as well. But that's 8 game weeks time, right? At this point, we're only worried about building our game week 1 drafts and getting through the first 4 to 6 weeks. There could be major injuries that make it a lot easier to get Salah in. So while that might happen at some point, I don't think it's really worth considering when you build your game week 1 squad, especially when so many people are going to have 2 to 3 of Odegaard, Saka, Rashford, Son, etc. You could just downgrade one of them and then upgrade another one to get Salah. So I hate to say it, because if you've watched my videos in the past, you know how much I love Salah, and I don't think there's any reason why he won't get another 200 plus points this season. I actually think Liverpool are going to be better than they were last year, but I think as things stand, you can definitely make a case to go against him. If anything, I said earlier that if Salah and Kane, everything was equal, I'd go for Salah. They're not really. The opening 2 fixtures are probably slightly better for Liverpool, Chelsea away, Bournemouth at home, than they are for Kane, Brentford away and Man United at home. But after that, Kane has Bournemouth away, great fixture, newly promoted side Burnley away, newly promoted side Sheffield United at home. So for the first 5 games, there's probably an argument to be said that Kane is the slightly better option. And the other thing that kind of helps that argument is there's a lot more you know, good 6 to 6.5 million midfielders than there are forwards. So if it's got to be a premium player at 12.5 and a 6.5 million pound player, you know, as part of the combination, Kane and Mbeumo versus Salah and a 6.5 million forward, you'd probably say Kane is the slightly better pick. So I can't believe... I'm not against Salah. I don't want to make it sound like I am. But even as I'm talking, I can't believe how many arguments I'm making to say that you probably don't need Salah. I still think there's every chance he makes it into my squad. I will try and get him in if I can. But apart from Game Week 2, I don't think there's really a huge amount to worry about. The only other thing I would say is you've got to be prepared to kind of hold your nerve. If Salah does well against Chelsea, you're suddenly going to look at Game Week 2 thinking, I need him. That's going to take a lot of surgery, which probably won't be worth it. But if you're the kind of FPL manager that's going to think that, you're going to want him in, it's probably easier to do it from the get-go. So just some closing thoughts, and this isn't exactly groundbreaking, but I do think that Erling Haaland is essential. People hate that word, but he pretty much is. Man City's number 9, who doesn't really get rotated, stayed fit for a lot of games last season. You've got to own him even at 14 million. It's just difficult to fight against that ownership. Like I'm looking now while I'm recording, 83.9% of the entire player base own him. There's over 1 million managers already in. Even when that starts to climb to 4, 5, 6 million managers, they're all going to have Haaland. So you've got to be absolutely sure it's the good time to back against him. And with the fixtures we just covered, I just don't think that is the case. One premium is more viable than it has been for many seasons. Of course, there were times in the past where you could get away with just having a Salah or just a Kane or whoever it might have been. But really, you'd usually have like 2 to 3, especially to rotate the captaincy. But for the first 6 weeks, you probably don't need to do that. Afterwards, maybe you do, like I already covered. But I think you can just tackle that when it kind of comes. You don't need to worry about that in Game Week 1. Even if Haaland does get injured, the switch to Kane is really easy. Even if you wanted to have Salah instead of Kane, it's 2 moves. And apart from Harry Kane at 12.5 and Haaland at 14 million, every other forward is 8 million or less. And if Haaland does get injured, Alvarez would then get a lot more minutes, and he's only 6.5 million. So you have plenty of money to spend. You'd want to make those multiple transfers anyway, so it's just not worth worrying about. Salah and Kane will, of course, still be great. No one's saying they won't be. Nobody is saying that at some point in this season you can't go and buy them. But there is question marks over whether they're better value than having 2 mid-price players instead. So Kane and a 6 million midfielder, Salah and a 6 million forward, or do you go for 2 kind of 8.5 million midfielders, play a 3-5-2 or something like that? So let me know down in the comments below. Have you already locked in 1 premium player? Are you considering 2? Is anyone going for 3? I don't think you can with the variety of good midfielders there are to choose from, but I'm sure some of you are thinking about it. So let me know down in the comments below. If you haven't already checked out Fantasy Football Hub, make sure you do. Link in the description below. I am partnered with them for this season. Otherwise, give the video a like, hit that subscribe button. Let's try and hit 400,000 before the end of the season, and I'll catch you again tomorrow for another video.